feels so good to get all of that out.
Oh my gosh. Happy Friday, everybody. As you can see, it has been a week for everyone, and the moms out there are frankly done. Okay, and we don't blame them. The story behind that very normal moment is coming up. Our director literally said stand by for screams before we started the show, and it was true to form. I'm Maggie Vespa. Welcome to The Story. Feel free to scream into our inbox anytime on this Friday. You can email the story at kgw.com. You can use the hashtag #TheStoryKGW. We do want to start with a little bit of self-reflection. I'm not going to scream at you, I promise. Lately, though, you probably know, school boards have been a topic of real contention in the news, and we've covered it a lot on this show, kind of leaning on moments like this.
You're cowards! Sit down! You are cowards! I will not sit down! I won't comply! You guys are cowards!
Other times, it's looked like this.
This is not a functioning business meeting. This is an after party of 4 members. So I say let's just vote, get it over with.
So, but despite all of that mayhem, it's actually, wait for it, School Board Appreciation Month. And it seems like school board members could really use some love after the last year, especially because not only have they had to make tough decisions for thousands of kids during an ever-changing pandemic, but they've also had to deal with brutal backlash and organized protests. And sometimes they've had threats to their safety. And keep in mind, these people don't even get paid for this gig. Enter fourth graders in the Salem-Keizer district, and this show of appreciation via art. They drew portraits of their school board members, and may we say, these are incredible. These specifically came from kids at Chapman Hill Elementary School. The schools first surprised the school board with portraits from 2 years ago, and it looks like it's becoming a tradition now, and we frankly love it. The school board members, for their part, absolutely love this as well. Board member Osvaldo Avila commented, "I love my portrait. The detail in my eyebrows is on point." Very nice. Ashley Carson Cottingham wrote, "These are all so amazing." They brought a lot of joy to our team, too, here on The Story. So to the Chapman Hill fourth graders, we're going to zero in on this one for a little while, apparently. Thank you guys so much from us as well. We really enjoyed these. Great job. With that, it's time for our big story. And tonight, we're going to zero in on one school board that's actually getting major praise. It's made up entirely of people of color, which board members say is crucial in such a diverse district. Here's Christine Pitawanich.
My name is Ana Gonzalez Munoz, and I am the current chair for the Reynolds School Board.
And right now, the Reynolds School District School Board is more diverse than it's ever been. All 7 members are people of color.
It's the only school board in the state of Oregon that is all BIPOC.
Here's a breakdown of the Reynolds student population by race. Steve Padilla, spokesperson for the district, says 44% of the student population identifies as Hispanic, 28% as white, 10% African American, 7% Asian, 3% Pacific Islander, 1% American Indian, and 7% say they're multiracial.
We have approximately 70 languages spoken within the student population.
While 7 diverse school board members can't represent every group in the district, Ana Gonzalez Munoz says it's a step in the right direction.
I think there's a value of bringing that authentic connection with the community that you're from. Yes, I'm Latina, Mexican American, and so for me to be able to share that perspective of personal experience makes a big difference.
She says she's committed to addressing a number of issues involving equity and inclusion. They're issues she's seen firsthand over her more than 25 years of being an educator.
I am so proud because, you know, traditionally the school boards have been represented by the demographics that are similar, you know, white folks, male, retired folks, and there's nothing wrong with that, except that, you know, a lot of times when we have that consistency, that means that there's no different perspectives.
And Padilla says having a diverse board as well as a superintendent who is Latina is good for students.
The student population across the state of Oregon is more diverse today than at any time in history. Nationwide studies have shown that students have higher achievement if they have teachers and administrators and board members that look like them.
For me to see more people of different cultures stepping up, wanting to represent their community in this spaces like the school board, it's a win. It's a win for everyone.
Munoz says race and diversity aside, one of the biggest things she and her fellow board members share is a desire and passion to see schools and students thrive. As for the Reynolds School District, like many others, it continues to work on hiring more diverse teachers to further reflect the student population. Christine Pitawanich, KGW News.
Let's turn now to a viewer question we got about a difficult but definitely important conversation we've been highlighting all week. And that conversation comes courtesy of A Different Cry. It's a deep dive on the disproportionately high rates of suicides among young Black kids nationwide. They're dying at twice the rate, simply put, of their white peers. A Different Cry comes courtesy of our sister station in Atlanta. You can find it now at kgw.com/adifferentcry. And after seeing the series, Susan wrote, "What seems to be missing from this story is what bullying is, its impact on young minds before suicide, and the appropriate parental and social response to bullying. Please shine a light," she wrote, "on solutions." Susan, thank you. That is an important follow-up, and it's actually one that the team behind this series is working on next. I talked about that with the lead reporter, Madison Carter. Do you have any further plans for this series or this story?
I think the only thing that I'd love to dig into more after, on the tail end of this is talking more about schools. Because I think people's first reaction are that there needs to be more rules or there needs to be more laws or regulations. And really, we found that more laws and more regulations have made this problem worse. So I'd love to do a next piece just talking about what we can do to train our kids to handle conflict, because the system we have in place right now is making the problem much worse for kids. And we didn't get into it too much in this piece, so I'm hoping in a follow-up we will.
Our thanks again to Madison and her team. By the way, that also got us wondering what schools are doing here to address this problem. And the timing, as it turns out, was pretty poignant, because earlier this week, our team got this news release from WIAA, or the Washington Interscholastic Activities Association. And it read in part, the WIAA has worked with member schools in regard to a number of incidents this academic year involving racist taunts and actions at athletic contests. These kinds of behaviors, it said, have no place in our schools and communities. What are they talking about, you ask? Well, at least in one case, we know they're talking about an incident at a girls' basketball game, a high school girls' basketball game at Camas High in December. And our own Tim Gordon covered this at the time. In fact, here's a clip from his piece, which first aired on January 5th.
During a game at Camas High School on December 10th, Benson coach Eric Knox calls a timeout in the third quarter over what his black and brown-skinned players were telling him. Later he wrote, "Throughout the game, both during play and timeouts, a number of my players told me one-on-one that they were hearing individuals from the student section using the N-word to taunt our players. It is clear from game footage that Coach Knox had had enough for his players' sake. Referees had to stop him from approaching the Camas student section as he said, 'We're not going to do this anymore.'"
Good for him for protecting the students, good for the students for trusting him to bring it forward.
So that last soundbite that you just heard was with Mick Hoffman. He's the executive director of the WIAA, the same agency that sent us that news release this week, which is kind of an update. And that release, by the way, also announced this new option, a discriminatory harassment form. The agency is asking students, athletes, fans, frankly, anyone at these games to report instances of racism and harassment. But we have to be honest, it's not clear what, if anything, will come from those reports. WIAA says it's working with individual school districts to address the issue. And it doesn't say what, if anything, happened to the Camas fans who yelled those racist and slurs at the visiting Benson High School basketball players in our story. We reached out to the Camas School District about that today. We haven't yet heard back. We'll let you know if and when we do. So in short, this is a massive question, and the answers will undoubtedly vary from district to district, even school to school. So we want to know, what is your school doing right in this realm? Or are there cases where you feel like they're failing to act? Tell us. Email thestory@kgw.com or reach out on social media with that hashtag #thestoryKGW. And we want to end with this point. If you or someone you know is in crisis, the Suicide Prevention Hotline is available 24 hours a day. That number is on your screen. It's 1-800-273-8255. All right. Switching gears, here's a question we got about rent assistance in Oregon. Amanda saw that Oregon's rent assistance portal reopened this week, and she wrote, has there been new funding approved? And then she added, are applications only being processed for new applicants that have not received assistance, or can those who have received help apply again? Amanda, great question. So to answer the first one, yes, new funding has been approved, courtesy of the Oregon State Legislature. You might remember lawmakers met for a one-day big special session in December, and they approved, among other things, $100 million in rent assistance. And they did that because federal rent assistance had run out by that point. In fact, Oregon was one of the first states to see that happening and then supply new state funding. And officials say they have enough money on hand this time around to help between 6,000 and 9,000 households.
We're going to have a window of time for folks to apply. And then once we collect sufficient applications, then we will begin processing those new applications as they come in, rather than having kind of a folks on a continual basis process those applications.
Do you know when that window might close? I'm sure to some degree it depends on how many come in.
Yeah,
but...
it does. We're looking at about 3 to 5 weeks. That's our estimate, but it really does depend on the volume of applications.
Okay, so 3 to 5 weeks, but it could be shorter if a ton of applications pour in. So keep that in mind if you need this help. Now to Amanda's second question, which is something experts say a lot of people are likely wondering if they got help, say, early in the pandemic, but they have still had to forego work to stay home with kids, or if they've lost shift work due to COVID restrictions, closing businesses, those kinds of things. Can people get help a second time around?
Thank you for that question. And again, my heart goes out to folks that are needing additional assistance. So prior to December 1st, when we had sufficient dollars, we were allowing folks to come in, a second time and get additional assistance. With these state dollars, because they're so limited, we're not able to offer that opportunity. And so what I would tell folks that have received assistance previously and are looking for more assistance is your best option is to go to one of those local rental assistance programs or to your local community action agency, because they also received dollars from the legislative session to help with short-term emergency rental assistance. So the good news is that there are still some dollars out there for folks to be able to get additional resources.
So again, that's advice for people needing help a second time around. And Amanda, we hope that helps. For those looking for help a first time, this is the website, OregonRentalAssistance.org.
A national headline is raising lots of questions. A Boston hospital denied a patient a transplant because they refused the COVID vaccine. We walk through the hospital's logic and ask, could that happen here? When the story continues.
Welcome back. Keep sending in those questions and comments to the story at kgw.com or use that hashtag #TheStoryKGW. We want to bring back now a question that a lot of you have asked in some form throughout the pandemic. Stephen wrote a while ago, at what point do we consider refusing hospital care to people who are presenting with COVID and who have refused a free, effective, safe vaccine, thereby overburdening our hospitals and frontline medical workers, threatening timely medical response to others, raising health insurance premiums for everyone, and fueling a resurgent pandemic? So, we have told you before, Oregon has something called the Crisis Standards of Care, which they just updated this month. Every state has these. The fact that they exist is not cause for alarm. These are only activated if and when hospitals get so overwhelmed they have to ration care. And let's be very clear, Oregon is not there. If and when that does happen, doctors and nurses would then prioritize giving medical care to, and this is key, people with the best likelihood of surviving. Officials say they do not and they cannot take into account who deserves care the most. That is a dangerous and slippery slope. So what this means in this context is, in most cases, your vaccine status is irrelevant. On that note, you might have seen this headline out of Boston this week. Hospital patient without COVID vaccination denied heart transplant. On the surface, it might seem like the hospital decided an unvaccinated person does not deserve a transplant. And that is what the patient's family is saying. But as NBC's Dasha Burns explains, it really does come down to that same standard, the chances of survival.
It's a race against time for DJ Ferguson and his family.
My son's in the hospital. He's in cardiac crisis.
The 31-year-old father of two with a third baby on the way desperately needs a heart transplant. But his mother says Brigham and Women's Hospital in Boston says DJ can't receive an organ donation because he won't get a COVID vaccine.
He's not an anti-vaxxer, but, he's compromised.
Tracy says DJ is concerned about the shot's potential heart-related side effects.
The Mayo Clinic listed on their website the myocarditis, pericarditis, and blood clots.
A new study just out this week shows of more than 190 million Americans who received an mRNA COVID vaccine before August 2021, just under 2,000 reported a case of myocarditis.
Do you think the trade-off of a vaccine for a transplant might be worthwhile?
Well, if they can prove to us that it's not going to take his life, I think he would jump on board.
In a statement, Brigham and Women's Hospital says they require several CDC-recommended vaccines, including the COVID-19 vaccine, to create both the best chance for a successful operation and to optimize the patient's survival. Health experts tell us vaccination requirements are standard procedure, given the risks to transplant patients and the scarcity of available organs.
It is almost common policy to say, if you don't have all your vaccinations, including COVID, you're going to be less eligible for a transplant than other people who are going to do better with a scarce heart.
Some hospitals, like Cleveland Clinic, require living donors to be vaccinated too. That policy put Mike Gaiman's kidney transplant on hold just days before surgery. Mike was vaccinated. His living donor wasn't.
All I remember feeling was, what are we going to do? Where do we go now?
Right now, more than 100,000 men, women, and children are on the national transplant waiting list. Tragically, 17 Americans die each day waiting for an organ transplant. Back in Boston, Tracy isn't sure what will happen next.
I would want the doctors to treat the patient, not the policy.
That was NBC's Dasha Burns reporting. Now, after seeing that story, we wanted to know, could the same thing happen to unvaccinated transplant patients in Oregon? So we asked OHSU, and they said yes. People on their wait list for an organ transplant must be vaccinated against COVID, among other diseases. A spokesperson told us, quote, Oregon transplant recipients must take immune-suppressing medications for the rest of their lives to prevent their bodies from rejecting the new organs. While these medications help protect transplanted organs, they unfortunately also place transplant recipients at higher risk for infection, including COVID-19. We also reached out to Providence with this same question, but we haven't heard back. All right, moving on tonight, we are well past wildfire season, but we know that damage lingers for years after the flames are out, and that damage comes in all forms. Now, more than a year later, businesses that survived 2020's historic wildfire season may still have to close because of it. We'll explain when the story continues. Welcome back. This is kind of a jarring sentence to think about, but we've been telling you about wildfire recovery efforts in Oregon from the historic 2020 season for the past 16 months now. That's how long it's been since those devastating fires that hit in September of 2020. And all this time later, a state highway outside of Estacada is still shut down, and it's having a big impact on businesses in that town. Here's Christelle Kumwe.
When he's not enjoying the great outdoors.
Yeah, we're water folks. Yeah, for sure. This is what I do, and I've been doing it for over 20 years.
Luke Spencer is here at Clackamas River Outfitters.
We sell paddling products and also do rentals out of the shop here.
Spencer turned his passion into a living and has run the downtown Estacada shop with his wife since 2015.
As the pandemic hit, we actually were doing fairly well with being able to recreate outside and the rentals, and folks could go out and paddle and, be distant from one another.
Their biggest setback came as a result of the 2020 wildfires.
In September, they closed the highway down, and it's been closed ever since. So that has definitely taken a bigger toll on us than the COVID situation.
You can still see burn scars from the Riverside fire along Highway 224. The road closed 60 months ago for repairs.
But we're here in Estacada. The closure here is right around Promontory.
19 miles of the highway is shut down, blocking the path to and from recreation areas in the Mount Hood National Forest.
In the winter, we rely on that winter boating traffic, to create revenue for our business. And without the availability of access to the river, those folks just aren't coming out here. They're going to other rivers, which doesn't bring them through Estacada and doesn't bring them into our shop.
Spencer says revenue is down about 85%. After 2 winters like this, he wants answers.
I'd love to speak directly to ODOT and to the Forest Service and then ask them, can we get a reasonable timeline? When are you going to open the river?
We're not going to be able to get this open still for a while.
The Oregon Department of Transportation says a lot of work still needs to be done.
We're still putting in new guardrails in there. We're still putting in signs. We have a lot of ditches that need to be clear. There's a lot of steps that need to be taken before this road is safe.
ODOT wouldn't even give an estimate of a timeline, saying they can't open it until they determine it's safe.
We know this has been very difficult for everybody in the neighborhood there. Bear with us for a little bit longer. We'll get it open as soon as we can.
The continued uncertainty could mean a temporary shutdown for Clackamas River Outfitters.
We're hoping we don't have to do that, but we'll take whatever measures we need to make sure that we can make it through this time and hopefully come out on the other side still here.
Christelle Kumwe, KGW News.
This week's Hey Help campaign is the Humane Society for Southwest Washington. They rely completely on donations to help care for the animals in their shelter. So if you want to donate, hold your phone's camera up to the QR code on your screen. You can also go to kgw.com/heyhelp. Yeah, we tortured you with that at the beginning, so we're going to do it again at the end. Keeping Portland weird tonight. The moms have had it. They are screaming their heads off in Gabriel Park because they have had enough from the last 2 years. And frankly, we don't blame them. We know the pandemic hasn't been easy on anyone. Healthcare workers, teachers, we see all of you. It has been a rough couple of years. But if you're a mom, especially of really young kids, you've been dealing with a lot.
It's been hard to juggle work and a lot of the COVID closures and quarantines. It's been a lot of time at home, a lot of ups and downs, a lot of just it dragging on.
Yeah, like we said, it's been a lot. It's hard to raise a kid in the best of times. You add trying to keep a mask on them and wondering when they can get vaccinated, and then worrying that daycare or school is going to close down again. Well, basically, a group of moms in Portland got together last night and decided, you know what, maybe it'll just help to get all of that out. Which photographer did we send to that shoot? I want to know. That's so fantastic. Pick up your phone, follow us on Twitter at @TheStoryKGW or email thestorykgw.com. You can scream into our inbox if you want to. We all need that sometimes. That does it for this show. The news at 6:30 with Laurel Porter.